Supervisor Kersten.
Here.
Treasurer Elliott.
Here.
Trustee Anderson.
Here.
Trustee Joseph.
Here.
Trustee Demink.
Here.
Trustee Vosberg.
Here.
Clerk Barry is here.
Item 4, the approval of the agenda. I would like to make a motion to approve the agenda as presented with the exception of removing item 9F, G, and H into our closed session so we can further discuss any questions that the board members may have on those labor agreements that are proposed.
Support.
Motion by trustee Demink, supported by trustee Anderson. Clerk Barry?
Trustee Demink.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph.
Aye.
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Treasurer Elliott.
Aye.
Supervisor Kersten.
Aye.
Clerk Barry, aye.
Item 5, we have presentation tonight from Hubbell, Roth, and Clark, HRC, on a water and sewer cost study. Been underway for some time. I welcome Jamie Burton to the podium, and Jamie, the floor is yours. We'll ask the board, we'll ask some questions after.
Fantastic, thank you. Township trustees, good evening. My name is Jamie Burton, again from Hubbell, Roth, and Clark. With me tonight is Brent Tarpinian. Together, along with some other staff, are responsible putting together this cost of service study for water and sewer. We'll kind of go into a little bit of the nuance of this is just the first part of an overall assessment of your overall financials related to water and sewer rates. We did connection fees, 18 months ago or so. But this is really looking at a deeper dive of your whole system. We've done this all over local areas, whether it's called cost of service or rate studies or whatnot. So we've done quite a bit of these, which is good because we were able to compare Chesterfield's structure with what we've seen in other places, and we find it's pretty typical, and I'll talk of some of that here in a minute. But it's important to note what this is and what this is not. So the first slide kind of up here defines what information or values is this included. We are attempting to find every penny spent on water and sewer over every rock, looking under rock, pop the hood, whatever your metaphor, analogy is, to finding all the cost. We've done that. Because if you think about it, it's not always, it could be it's all appropriately accounted for, but your principal could be in one statement, your debt can be another, your interfund transfers. So between your financial statements, your audited statements, and your ongoing, your great track record by your finance director, all of that information sometimes gets muddied up a little bit. And you gotta peel all that apart and put that out as what does it cost to provide your residents with high quality water and sewer services. So we pulled everything out we could, financial records. We'll talk a little bit about, we've talked to everybody, we've had a bunch of meetings, and really done a deeper dive into all of these items. What we have not done, this is all a backward-looking analysis. This is not a forward-looking analysis, which would be the next rate study to do. We did not look at, for example, the trends in your development connection fees, or your fees provided by others, or your capital investment by transferring water and sewer infrastructure to the township in the upcoming years. This is not a forward-looking analysis yet. Eventually, that would be the next step. We did not do, I can comment on certain things like GLWA's kind of plan of attack, maybe the county's a little bit, but we didn't sit down and say, give us your 10-year plan for Chesterfield Township costs and expenses, right? And the final thing is, we've touched on capital improvement plans, but our job was not to shake those trees and look at that. You have consultants who have put together great capital improvement plans. Your staff has really done a tremendous job working towards those plans. Far be it from us to comment on those at this time. So kind of we switched this around, put the summary slide up front. And what it amounts to is Chesterfield Township has over a $21 million utility, okay? It costs $21 million to operate water and sewer per year. In the industry, we joke, the first gallon of water in Chesterfield costs $21 million. The last one doesn't cost a penny, right? Because you have a lot of fixed costs and a lot of things going into that. System has to be up and running, no matter how much water you sell, which turns, not to be gross, and it's after dinner, all the water you sell that turns into sewage, right, at the end of the day. So that's what it cost. The caveat there, and it's a little small on the screen, is some of those items include things like depreciation. Depreciation on your assets is not a cash. That is not cash trading hands, a vendor service or a contract. That is just the loss in value of those assets over time. So the differential between those two is closer to around $2 million, $18 million to $16 million. I want to stop here and say point blank, no one should leave this meeting and say you're $2 million short. You're not. What it means is that certain things, your revenue set up for the last few years, your projections, or your actual revenue generated the last few years is 16 million. What your intended revenue was probably higher. COVID stopped development for 6 months, right? Or 8 months, and then it boomed. Those things still are playing out today, several years later, on the revenue side. But ultimately, on a look-back position, it shows about $2 million. Next slide, please. So where did we find all of this? Your Township Board approved budgets, your annual comprehensive financial reports, your audited reports. We've talked to your finance accounting staff. They were great to work with, provide us a lot of background information, things that weren't approved final audits, but were in process, we were able to get a hold of to make sure our study was the most accurate. Met with supervisor and staff, DPW, city attorney, township attorney, finance director multiple times. And then we really pulled a lot of information. Part of the scope, and actually your request for your original proposal for a rate study talked about making sure we are utilizing the most current best practices as identified in certain guidance documents. And the one that we really looked at is the AWWA guide for principal rates, fees, and structures. By pulling everything out in this manner, I'm going to say this again at the end, but it is our hope that the township now can almost undisputedly have an honest conversation about items that pertain to water and sewer rates. What I mean by that is, where do you put your level of effort? Where do you put your expenditures? I jokingly had said one point, you're stepping over hundreds to pick up nickels, okay? And so as you look at your expenses down to the smallest of percentages of your overall, and now you can really have that clarity to say, I think we should spend our efforts or our time on the items that are impact the rates to our people the most. A 10% savings at something that's 0.5% of the overall budget does not amount to a whole lot in the big scheme of things, but a 10% savings by refinancing debt, by looking at some of the capital or expenses, has a significant potential impact on what your ratepayers pay. And we really broke that down into kind of a few categories, which we'll talk about here in a second again, but really, how influential is Chesterfield Township on your own with things like the sewer rate system, the regional sewer system, or the regional water system? You got to continue to, Mitch and others attend those regional meetings and try to influence those to the best, to the best benefit to your community. Then there's some other areas that you need to deal with, which we've identified as efficiencies. We believe 100% of the time you should be trying to operate the most efficient economic system while still providing the level of service to your community. And some of those things should be deferred to management. And those other things that ultimately are staff-related, meaning staff can influence, that don't really amount to a huge amount overall, but obviously you can't let it slide. So those are kind of the smaller things. We kind of gave 2 or 3 examples up there. Another one of my communities, for example, said, hey, we need to look at how many cell phones we give out. In Chesterfield Township, do you want to do a $25,000 study to save $6,000 in cell phone bills to water and sewer? It doesn't, again, stepping over hundreds to pick up nickels gives you as a township board the opportunity to talk about what is our priorities and where do we really want to spend some energy, especially your capital resources moving forward system. Next slide, please. I'm going to kind of skip over this one a little bit, but really the point that I want to kind of try to make here, this is all things. This is the full $21 million. And you look at your biggest piece of the pie, your sewer charges, which are both from Great Lakes Water to the county and then the county to you, your water purchases directly from Great Lakes Water, your depreciation expense, you slide around principal expenses, you're pushing 60%, and you haven't really even talked about staff or what I would call what the township can control. So there's a lot of fixed costs in the system. The report kind of talks about that. Again, that goes to the joke, $21 million for the first gallon, because you have a lot of fixed costs, right? You cannot operate a system down to zero cost. It just doesn't work for these things. But if we go, I'll do a little deeper dive on the other two. So starting with water, more than 50% of the actual expense comes through your pass-through expenses. Great Lakes Water. Great Lakes Water, I believe, especially since the board and the transfer from Detroit to Great Lakes Water has done a way better job. But their costs continue to go up like everybody else. They're building big projects, big infrastructure, cost, inflation, et cetera. But they're 55% of that. And that should be, the township should plan. I'm kind of deviating from that slide a little bit, but their water and sewer rates are going to go up 3 to 5% on average. Their needs consistently is just the plan of attack. They were going to have to, similar to some of your expenses. So that you should plan on some of those things. As you work your way around your operations 5%, we kind of grouped a whole bunch of stuff called other items. Your depreciation is included in your purchase of new assets in there. So you kind of see where, where every dollar somebody spends on water, now you can clearly put this on your website. You can clearly say, this is where it goes. It's not going to Chesterfield Township to do whatever. This is where it is headed, every dollar spent. So we go to sewer side. Sewer side is a little bit different, and you are unique, in my opinion, in that you have no water debt. Okay, most communities, if they are leveraged, they're leveraged on both sides to some extent equivalent. You only have sewer debt, and that sewer debt is only passed through. So your principal interest becomes a pretty big chunk. The sewer charge has it, and then your own sewer. So that's passed, a lot of that's passed through, or most of it's passed through. So you see more than 50% is really almost entirely fixed costs on sewer side. You add your depreciation, again, that's kind of fixed. It's a non-cash item, but it's kind of fixed. Then you look at some of these, net interest expense, principal. Those are all generally fixed. Those are due the first day you have sewer service, whether you use it or not. So you kind of start looking down at, spending, contractual service operations. Those are the areas of influence that you have, but they won't amount, dramatic savings in those areas are still not going to mean dramatic savings for your ratepayers, but you have the ability to affect those other things. Next slide. So where are we? So this is the full rate study kind of analysis. I stole this from a professor at Michigan State that I do a lot of work with. And ultimately, you set these things up. I call this is the slide of pie. We've used some pie charts. Revenue requirements is really how big is the pie you need to collect. That's the $21 million, plus or minus, and you start to do some things. The cost allocation is some of those slices should go to certain people in certain ways. Your industrial pretreatment costs on your sewer side should go to your industrial pretreatment users, not your residential users. So how big is the pie? Who gets a piece? And that's kind of about where we're at now, right? We stop there. We know where all these expenses are. I know how much money should be spent specifically on certain sewer things to go to the customer class. That's the allocation. In the future, we can start getting into the goal setting. And the goal setting is really about affordability, items, who should pay, how do we want to collect. So where I always get in the conversation about fixed charges on your end versus, fully variable cost and what those expenses look like, and ultimately that rate design. So I want to just kind of point this out as to where we're at. We know with confidence through 2021, we feel in 2022 would be pretty easy to add to this, where every penny's been spent and every penny goes on your water and sewer. We know that informs us as to who should be responsible for paying those expense items, which is number 2. And then we can actually talk a little bit about the goal settings, rate design. But we wanted to make certain that the public and the township board knew exactly kind of where we stopped this intentionally. We're kind of walking before we run here. Next slide. So what can happen? We talked about this. Chesterfield has always participated in the regional collaborative efforts through the Great Lakes Water Authority's work groups, through Commissioner Miller's various groups on the sewer side. The entire community that is serviced by that system needs to continue to lean on them, push for efficiencies, and make sure our voices are heard. And change can happen. In fact, a lot of change over the few years has happened. And then always, I use the word optimization very intentionally. It's not always about lowering cost. It might be about changing level of service. It might be about customer expectations. Are you over-delivering something that no one cares about, but you're under-delivering certain things that they really care about? You want to have the most optimized system for, spending your time and spending your valuable resources. And you have the ability through union negotiations, cooperations, and just normal efficiency practices are pretty straightforward. And obviously, there's other areas that you can look into, or through the superintendent's groups, through some of the other resources for water and sewer folks that meet. They can talk about some of these other things, and pool resources is all equipment resources, pool resources are always an option too. You could increase rates or restructure rates, obviously, to balance the other side. We're not there yet because we did the fee study, and the fee studies has to be taken into consideration here. That's part of that revenue requirement and part of those expenses as well. Next slide. So we're at the cost of service study. The next step would be the rate study. We've gone through this. And then the final thing would be to amend your township ordinances to reflect those. If you remember during the connection study, it resulted in the need to change some of the way we define the definitions, the way where the money flows, how the money flows needed to be changed within your ordinance. So if we keep moving forward, the township keep moving forward, just understand that there's two more steps here to go. Next slide. So where we're at today in recommendations is we provided the master spreadsheet. It is just an Excel spreadsheet that tracks a lot of things. It's got a lot of bells and whistles to it, but generally pretty straightforward, and your accounting maps pretty close to it, so we can keep adding to it so we can keep seeing it. So once the 22 audits and the 22 financials, put those in there. You can put 23 budget in there. That's how you start to set your perspective, move forward, proposed rates. We have talked a little bit about a couple items that are possible with the finance director related to when you map things, some of your bonds have refunds and the refunding in. And so you look at your debt schedule and then you look at your financial statements, and sometimes they don't line up because of the refunding. There's some things, there's calculations that sometimes, I'm getting this a little bit wrong because I'm not a bond guy, but some of those things kind of get aggregated within the financial statements, which is perfectly appropriate and a reasonable thing to do. But also when you start talking about rates, we're gonna have to pull those things apart because it's, what are you obligated for, what are you not? So those are some of the things we've talked about, but very minimal on that. And then ultimately, this is step one, and eventually, an updated rate study, just simply passing through Detroit rate increases is gonna catch up to sooner or later, so we are gonna recommend a rate study from there. So with that, be happy to answer any questions you may have. This is just the presentation of what we found.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. If you could maybe go back a couple of slides, the heading that you had was the corrective action slide.
Yep.
And the reduced system expenses, the second bullet point, you're talking about staff optimization, union contract, and efficiency practices. And I'm wondering when you do an analysis of like how we spend our money, the expenses side, how many employees are you factoring into the staff portion of that?
So I did not look at it from, I looked at it from only a cost standpoint. I understand you guys undertook a staffing study or had a staffing study. I looked at it from a cost perspective. So when I group categories of expenses in staffing across these things, and you look at your staff component, which is 8-10% or whatever that might be. Sure. There's always an opportunity, for cross-training, cross-referencing, cross-doing between departments, and how you handle that. I think you you can always kick those tires and pop that hood and see, make sure, from a management team perspective, I did not factor in, so if I were to look forward at a future rate, and you guys told me these are based on 10 FTEs, and we actually need 16, then on a forward-looking rate, we would factor those in. But right now, I just looked at expenses, not people. I didn't look at vehicles, for example, either, number of vehicles. I simply said your vehicle costs are X, and those seem reasonable.
Well, the reason I'm asking is because you're talking about, like in bullet point number 2 in particular, you're talking about efficiencies within the individual FTEs. You know, how much are you paying them? What does that cost? And so when you get into, you know, union contracts, I assume that's what you're talking about. Like, what does it cost you for an FTE? And those are, you know, contractually agreed upon, so it shows up in the reduced system expenses column. Like that is, I guess, on some level. But what I'm thinking about in terms of efficiencies has more to do with the sort of executive level. So if we make decisions about, you know, what projects we're going to be working on, and those are not good, then we can drive up costs, you know, in the you know, for the ratepayer in essence. And when do we take a look at that, or do you have the capacity to take a look at that?
So I don't think that Chesterfield, so I'll preface this statement by saying, this was not an analysis of your CIP or your maintenance plans or that. It was a backwards looking expense conversation. But I can tell you what I found and what I believe to be is very similar across most of my communities that I work with, which is resources are scarce, right? We are attempting to run a utility with the least amount of impact to our residents, and we are deferring maintenance and we're deferring capital. So when I talk about, to your point, efficiencies of projects, I think we need to start looking at more maintenance, more preventative maintenance versus run to failure modes, right? Wait for the water main to break 10 times and then go replace it. I think you should be looking at efficiencies when you look at pump stations. Are we doing the right pumps and the right backups to make sure they're energy efficient? Because moving water takes a lot of energy, and your energy bill can be big. And sometimes we don't think about that to the end. Your engineers are good. They'll make sure you got the right stuff. But as this township board addresses the capital, to your direct point, I think you should be asking the questions, does this help us reduce costs? Does this help us shift some of that burden? Because infrastructure is aging rapidly, as you guys are well aware. But I think preventative maintenance is overlooked in almost every single one of my communities. No one's spending enough money to make sure it doesn't break, where it costs more money and you have to do it at that point. But I think there's some opportunities to look at it from that perspective on projects.
I don't want to be here all night, and I don't want to belabor the point. But my concern is this: when we look at the Department of Public Works and the number of employees, there are DPW functions that would be directly commensurate with what the ratepayer, whether it's water or sewer, is using. And then there are other township activities that are done by Public Works employees. And I'm curious to know, how do we separate those from, you know, water rate and sewer rate payers, you know, getting charged for what it costs? As you said, it takes a tremendous amount of engineering and a tremendous amount of work to get fresh water in, safe water in, and sewage out. And there is I'm assuming, industry standards in terms of how many employees, community our size, with the volume that we use and so forth, that you could get a general accurate idea of how many employees it takes, how many FTEs
Sure.
for a community our size. I have, since I've been on this board, and this is my third term, been very leery of everything being done under the ratepayers bill, and trying to separate who does what in Public Works. And it is a very difficult task, and so it seems to me to be a bit sloppy in that area. So when I'm talking about efficiencies, I'm not talking about the individual employees, or I'm not really concerned. We have great labor negotiations, and they get, you know, hopefully a salary that keeps them here, you know, that they're not constantly looking to go somewhere else. But I'm not concerned that we have the potential to save much money there as I am in when I'm talking about efficiency. What's the size of the DPW? How many of those are charged to the ratepayer, because they're the ones that the water and sewer bills are what's paying them. So we don't want to be doing other township activities.
Sure.
And that becomes very executive in nature. So that doesn't have anything to do with the, staff. That is a board directive, and in most instances, it's the executive that makes that decision. And we've done a lot of things that I've really, over the years, looking back, that worry me about, what we have in the enterprise fund, what we potentially should have in the enterprise fund, and so forth. So that's where I'm going with efficiencies. How do we get a look at that?
So, looking at the efficiencies and the tracking of time, so we spent a little bit of time trying to dive into, because on those costs, even for this study, they're aggregated water and sewer, how many FTEs, right, were brought into the system. And we kept asking, well, how do I separate these costs into water and sewer? And so I'll say that timesheets, right, and tracking of time is not that difficult, is something that could be done, and I'm not sure, to be honest, I don't even know if you guys do, how you track those materials, the load of stone goes out, is it going into a sewer trench or a water trench? Those are all things that can be done in, internally kind of tracking. I don't see that as very difficult to do, and including where do they spend their time? Am I on sewer? Am I on water? Am I picking up leaves? Am I putting up lights? Am I doing cemetery call? Then you had a problem. Whatever those issues might be, those people get called upon. My cautionary tale for that is it's also, it has to be on a go-forward basis, a little bit aggregated and a little bit averaged. And the reason for that is if you can tell me how many water main breaks I'm gonna have this year versus sewer clogs, then I can tell you how to allocate those for next year. This is all about setting the table for next year. And we don't know the answer to all of that. So the auditing stuff or this process or timesheets or tracking or really getting down to the hourly kind of where you're spending your time and materials is great. But it's only to inform and to average out over for the upcoming year and how we set that for water and sewer rates. Because remember, we're setting water and sewer rates for a year that has not occurred. It's a forward perspective look. And so I could just caution those things this year, and actually this happened, we asked that same question, oh man, this year was all water, last year was all sewer, and this thing kind of yo-yos, right? Because they can't be in two places at once either, so it's kind of one or the other. And so which year is it going to be next year? No, you got to start to take those averages, and your ratepayers should know that, yeah, maybe this year that one guy spent more time on water and he was charged more to sewer, but next year it could be reversed. So we are looking at, we have trends on there for 5 years of trends too on which ways these things are going. So that's how you handle the efficiency of tracking. I think is kind of.
I think we're moving in that direction in terms of the BSNA software now allows us to, attach projects, and so we can hopefully keep track of that a lot easier. And my last question to you is, when you're talking about rate schedules for, you did a nice job of explaining, like you're talking about rates that are upcoming, like you're trying to project next year's, and that's what this does. I would hope that our enterprise fund helps us in terms of like a slight miscalculation or an unforeseen, so the enterprise fund balance has been a critical issue for me for over 10 years, and I don't think I've ever gotten a straight answer in terms of how do you structure your rate to capture a certain amount in that enterprise fund that's not too high and it's not too low. Do you base that on 6 months of expenditures, 6 months of revenue? But like, how do you structure that? And then do we have a plan that has a threshold of if we have a water main break of X amount of dollars, we know instantly that we're going to bond that out or we're going to pay it at a cash rate? And these are the things that are more executive in nature in terms of the efficiencies that, I'd like to see, as part of our discussion about the possibility of increasing rates.
So the least favorite phrase I like to use in standing before a client of mine is to say it's not what that was not included in the scope of this first analysis. Sure. However, I will tell you that you should answer. Those are all really phenomenally great questions that need to be answered, need to talk about. I think that so I'm going to shed a little bit of light on that. I believe this community needs to have more funds available than others. And the reason for that is because of the nature, your pump stations, the nature of your highways, the nature where your utilities are, okay? A water main break under 23 Mile Road is not the same as a water main break under Sugar Bush, right? So if you start talking about having resources, you've got some expensive repair emergencies. So I think it's going to be a little bit difficult to compare yourself directly to a bedroom community, okay? One of my other communities that has no infrastructure under a river, canal, right? You guys are a little bit different. So I think there's operating reserves and cash flow, and then there's capital. And the best thing to do first is get your long-range capital locked in. I know staff has been working on it. And to show that, because I don't think you want to put it all on the ratepayers. You want to pull that out of reserves and or bonds and have conversations about that level of when do we pull the trigger on debt versus not. I am a firm believer that you pay cash as long as you can because it saves. Well, right now, think about if you planned an infrastructure project last year and you're selling bonds at 8% versus 2.5% 3 years ago or 2 years of 16 months ago, whatever that was. So those are all really great questions. This can help inform a lot of those conversations. Where are those expenses? And unfortunately, when you deal with reserves, for example, it stacks. It's not just operation, and we'll use that for operation plus emergency. You got to really think about that. Operations, emergency, next year's debt. And also, I'm going to say, throw another, and rate smoothing. It's okay to be a little under this year and be a little over next year and not pass everything on, right? If you got a little reserves and you got a little fluctuation, I like smoothing these things out, almost consistent. So your ratepayers know they're going to see a 6%, 4% versus 12%, 0, 6%. People lose their mind when that stuff occurs over time. Instead, I like just smooth it out. When you get a little plus, you put that in the bank. When you get a little negative, you take it out. So that's how I operate. That's questions. Other questions?
Thank you. Back on the pie thing, you talked about the depreciation. I think I have an idea of what that means, but could you explain the depreciation, how that's related to capital, to fund balance, all those types of things, and in light of, because I was thinking, well, we could just put depreciation down to 0. Let's ignore depreciation.
Yeah, so I'm going to explain this from an engineering in kind of the rate setting method side of this, not necessarily the financial audit statement, okay? When you look at the expenses to operate your system, you are losing value in those assets, and that's the depreciation, right? You're expending value in your assets. So it is real in that sense. I will take that out when we do the rate study because I don't need, there's not money trading hands on a cash basis. Your township rate settings should be set up like your checkbook, in and out when it happens, not accrual accounting or on your financial statements. You can do the financial statements when you set the rates. Well, how much cash do we need? Who we're going to collect it from, and how we're going to do it? Very simple. But depreciation is that. Now, in theory, that's how much of the value of your system you lost. So let's say it's $1 million a year. It's a little higher in this case, but let's say it's $1 million a year. That means your system is $1 million. It's the equivalent, the cash equivalent of the value of the system or the operation of the system. So you just lost $1 million of value, $1 million of operation. A rule of thumb is you should be spending at least the depreciation on new capital or revitalizing current capital or assets, meaning relining sewers, replacing water main lining, doing the repairs to improve their life, at least just to stay even. But that's just on the financial side. From the engineering side, we all know that water mains, under the canals are ones that, the break-prone ones are the ones that hammer break more. There's sewers that leak more. It doesn't just go in a perfect economic decline. They kind of go and then they go. So that doesn't really reflect that. But on an economic basis, that's the number you put in just to keep your system the same value per year. Otherwise, your system is like $80 million book value, whatever it is. It's going to be 79, 78. It's just a good way to test. We try to get our clients to start with funding your capital program equivalent to your depreciation, but you're not making headway at that much. You got to go higher than that typically. So that's how, but we pull it out for rates because that's not money trading hands.
Sure.
But we would add in the additional capital. So you don't get away from it per se, but you just don't use it in the rate setting process.
Thank you.
You're
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor.
Excellent. Thank you.
Just a brief update from the library board. As your liaison, I was at last week's meeting, and there was an issue involving personnel, which the board has been, I hope, alerted by Ms. Mattson, who sent an email indicating that the personnel item on the agenda was actually a closed session. So at the time of last week's meeting, they apparently identified a candidate and had not, kind of closed that deal. Ms. Mattson reports, and the public should be aware, that the Chesterfield Township Library Board of Trustees has selected an individual by the name of Eric Magnus Eubank as its next library director. He will begin his work with the board and the community of Chesterfield Township on Monday, February 27th. I'm interested in meeting with this individual because I know as the liaison, I've heard from a number of board members. We get inundated when the library goes out for a millage, and there are a lot of questions that are posed to board members. Why are you doing that when you need the money for this? And the simple fact is that the library board operates completely independently of the township board. The library board of trustees are elected individuals. They have their own separate financing structure that does not go through the township. We don't vote on how the library spends their money. The Chesterfield Township Library Board of Trustees does. And so I also consulted with our township attorney, and there is no action legally that this board can take if the library board decides to go out for a millage. I guess we could pass a resolution declaring our position on it, but there's no deliberation from this board regarding the possibility of a millage and what the millage would look like. That's decided by the library board. I am curious because the library director I think has considerable influence over the library board, and I'm curious to know if this director believes that the township is in need of a millage to build what the previous library director has called a proper library. And so I'd like to know, just from an elected official standpoint, what that looks like in terms of where the board may be heading with regard to funding and their sort of ongoing plans. And that's all I have, Mr. Supervisor. Thank you.
From Leisure Services, Parks and Rec, Brandenburg Park Rentals. Rentals for the 2023 park season begin February 1st for Chesterfield residents, February 3rd for non-residents. Rentals of both the open-air pavilion and the Brandenburg building will be available. The park space can be rented between Memorial Day weekend and Labor Day weekend, with the exception of July 22nd through August 6th, 2023. We invite you to utilize this premier space for your family reunion, graduation party, memorial event, or birthday party. Spring baseball. The spring season of youth baseball registration is open. Spring season gameplay takes place in May and June. Register your child ages 5 to 15 today. Community Center. The Chesterfield Community Center is now open. Visit to check out the building or attend a program that catches your eye. Seasonal hours through the end of April are Monday through Thursday, 4 to 8 p.m., Saturday and Sunday, 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. Rentals are now available for several rooms within the facility. You can contact Parks and Rec Department for rental information. And finally, seasonal hiring. Chesterfield Parks and Recreation Department will be hiring for several seasonal positions, beginning February 15th, 2023. Position hiring are for ages 16 and older. Seasonal jobs include summer camp, park staff, and supervisory levels. Thank you, Mr. Supervisor.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. First, from the Elections Department, a lot going on in elections right now. The post-election audits that are standard, typical, and required by law are occurring now. Chesterfield Township has been selected to have one precinct audited for its procedures. It's a procedural audit of one of our 19 precincts. Many other communities were required to audit much more, but we had a very minimal requirement. That will be taking place here on February the 6th. That is open to the public. It will take place in this room for anyone who is interested in viewing that. The county Board of Canvassers and the county, clerk's office will be administering that audit with the Chesterfield Township Clerk's Office assisting. We will let you know the result of that audit. We expect that it will all go well. Also, with regards to elections, because of what was passed in November by the citizenry, there are many, many, many changes that need to occur at a legislative level that affect future elections. Chesterfield currently does not have an election scheduled for 2023. However, there is a possibility that we could have an election in November of 2023, and we hope that the legislature has made all the appropriate changes and adjustments. One of the changes that it's been being discussed at a subcommittee level that's been established by the legislature to address all of this, because a lot of the provisions that were passed in the citizen initiative that passed in November are in direct conflict with current election law. So therefore, a lot of election law changes are going to have to take place. One of the changes that's being discussed in order to help facilitate some of this is eliminating August primaries. For those of us who ever run for office or people who pay attention, you're used to voting in August if you're a primary voter. They are discussing right now eliminating August primaries and instead having May or June primaries. If that is the case for 2024, that means any candidate running for office in 2024 will be filing for office as early as January of that year, which is 4 or 5 months in advance of when they typically would do that. So there's a lot of changes that may be coming. We will keep everyone updated. All of our voters and residents, the public will be updated as soon as we know something. We will let you know, but please be aware that many, many changes are coming. So if it seems like they come in kind of rapid fire, a rapid succession one to the other, that's because there is so very, very much that has to be altered because of the changes that passed in November. So we will keep you updated as we know them. Secondly, in the clerk's office, we recently held our late night passport for January. We serviced over 40 passports that night. We do have our second of the year late night passports coming up on February the 23rd. We highly encourage you to register in advance. That is not required, but we do recommend highly that you do that. Those slots fill up very, very quickly, especially with spring travel coming, and that will reserve your spot. So if you want to make sure you have a spot for those very unique evenings when you can come in after hours in order to have a new passport processed, we highly recommend that you check our website and register in advance. Thank you. All items under the consent agenda are considered routine by the board and will be enacted in one motion. There is no separate discussion of these items. If discussion of any item is required by a board member, it will be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately. Public comments on the consent agenda items are permitted. 7A, approval of the minutes of the regular board meeting of January 10th, 2023. Approval of the payment of bills is submitted by the Finance Department. C, a recommendation by the supervisor to approve the Salt River Greenway Concept Plans SEMCOG grant project for Leah Groya Planning and Consultation in the amount of $32,250. This is a SEMCOG grant project pass-through that was addressed at the April 12th, 2022 board meeting and the October 11th, 2022 board meeting. D, approve a recommendation to re-enter into a one-year agreement with Diligent, formerly known as iCompass, for agenda management and video services in the amount of $18,275.67.
We have a motion to approve the consent agenda as read.
Motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Support.
Moved by Clerk Barry, supported by Treasurer Elliott. Comments from the public?
John Speaker, 53978 Connor Drive. On the consent agenda, I would have liked to have seen discussion on item D on that one-year agreement with Diligent in the amount of $18,275.67. When I looked at the agenda packet, it looked like it was for video conferencing for the township, and I would have liked to have seen that not on the consent agenda, but on the regular agenda. But on the bill run, a couple issues. As a homeowner, a taxpayer in Chesterfield Township, and a property taxpayer in this township, I have concerns when I look at the bill run, and I see my money being wasted along with the rest of the residents here at Chesterfield. On the bill run, under Supervisor's office, I've got a $25 reimbursement for Macomb County for the state of the address. I mean, I've got, the supervisor is a full-time position at $103,000 plus benefits per year. To submit a $25 refund on the taxpayers is totally ridiculous. That, I can't even believe we're having that discussion, or that, you know, the current supervisor would do that. Under the supervisor's office, you know, there's embroidered shirts for $163.40. I mean, when did Chesterfield get in the apparel business? So I didn't know we were in the apparel business. Under human resources, I've got another $25 refund, which I'm gonna guess was the deputy, or the human resource director, Mr. Duchesne, on a refund on a ticket. He's another $118,000 employee that shouldn't be turning in a $25 receipt. And then I've got embroidered T-shirts or shirts at $37.95 under human resources. Totally ridiculous. Then I get to the treasurer's office, and there's another refund. And I've had this discussion with Miss Elliott on several occasions. At almost $100,000 plus benefits, why in the hell are you turning in a $25 receipt for a State of the Union on the taxpayer's dime? It's totally ridiculous. If we continue, not only do we have the supervisor's office, but then we have the management office at $414 for embroidered shirts, and then another 2 tickets for $50. I'm tired of our tax money being wasted.
Clerk Barry?
Clerk Barry, aye. Treasurer Elliott.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph. Aye. Trustee Demink.
Aye.
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Supervisor Kersten.
Aye. Item 8, public hearing, there are none. Item 9, the regular agenda. Item 9A.
Item 9A is to approve a request to adopt Resolution 2023-01, Number 1, and Resolution 2023-02, Number 2, and set the date for a public hearing for February 28th at 7:00 p.m. for the purpose of hearing any objections to the petition, the installation of said proposed improvements, and the creation of a special assessment district. Therefore, for the proposed establishment of a special assessment district for installation of bridge replacement improvements on Anchor Drive and Private Shore.
So moved. Support. Motion by trustee Demink, supported by trustee Joseph. Mr. O'Connor and Ms. Bavay, if you would address this topic, please.
Good evening. This project is to replace the bridge in Anchor Drive that serves exclusively Private Shore. It's a private road, private bridge. We did have a meeting with the residents affected. We did discuss the price and the schedule, and the majority of the district did wish to proceed with this project, so that's where we are.
Thank you, sir. Any comments from the board? Trustee Joseph.
Mitch, I know we go through this a lot, but just if you could reiterate, because we have a couple of issues involving special assessment districts, what this means to the average taxpayer in terms of whatever taxes they may pay or anything along those lines, and kind of clarify what a special assessment district is?
A special assessment district is a state law, state act, that allows a township to finance a project that serves a specific area, a public improvement for a specific area. It could be a water main, sanitary sewer, a road project, or a bridge replacement. And the people who benefit from that project pay. The township does not pay, only the benefiting properties pay for the improvement.
The only outlay of cash, if you will, is to, like if a community wants lighting in their subdivision, and it's a, confined space, and they want to have the township pay for it and then impose a special assessment for just the people who benefit from that specific project. So when you're dealing with a special assessment district, most of the time, the community, somebody from the community will come forward to the township and present the plan that is just specific for their neighborhood or their area, and only impacts increase in
Correct.
taxes for that beneficiary.
Yes. This project and projects like this are initiated by a property owner within that district. So a property owner on private shore initiated this SAD, just like the property owners on North Bay or Roselawn. Prior SADs are always initiated by a property owner who is benefiting from the project.
Thank you.
Thank you. Further comments? Ms. Bouvet, do you want to add anything to that?
Thank you. I was just going to mention that we had petitioners that submitted the petition was 58.05% in favor, which is above the 51% required by statute. So.
Thank you. Comments from the public? Oh, I'm sorry, Treasurer Elliott.
This question is maybe possibly for the attorney. When will we, I don't see it in the assessment, in the resolution, but when do we do this with an interest rate? Normally there is an interest rate, or we're not setting that today? The SAD?
No, we don't do that today. The purpose of today, under Act 188, there's a 5-resolution process. Once the petitions are submitted to the assessor and they've determined that they are sufficient, meaning they meet more than the 50% rule, then they come to the Township Board. You are, by adopting Resolution 1, you are declaring your tentative agreement to proceed with this. And Resolution 2 sets what's called the necessity hearing, which will be February 28th. The notices will go out. There will be mailings to the residents within the Special Assessment District. There will also be a publication. Those residents can then come in on February 28th. And even though there's more than 50%, the board is still not required to proceed with the district. They will hear public comment, and people will try to sway the board potentially one way or the other, which is really academic. In most cases, it's not. When you get a petition like this, they're interested in getting the project done, but that's the purpose of necessity. On February 28th, for the next one, and more in particular, they will, the board will make a determination that the petitions are sufficient. There's a need for the improvement. The district will be created, and at that point, you will set the installments. There will then be a roll that will be prepared. That roll will then be the subject of a second public hearing. The residents will then be given the same notice they were in the first hearing. They'll be given a mailing. There will be a public notice. The residents will come in and have an opportunity to object to the roll. At that final hearing, the board will then confirm the roll and adopt Resolution number 5, which will set the assessment, and it will also determine the interest rate. And then the process will be complete.
Thank you.
Any further comments from the board? Comments from the public? Comments from the public? Go ahead, Mitch.
If I may add, before the roll is spread, before public hearing number 2, we will prepare plans and publicly receive bids, and that's what the roll will be spread on, the actual bidded cost of the project.
Thank you. No further comments from the public? I have a motion by Trustee Demink, supported by Trustee Joseph, to approve item 9A as presented. Clerk Berry?
Trustee Demink.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph. Aye. Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Treasurer Elliott.
Aye.
Supervisor Kersten.
Aye.
Clerk Barry, aye.
Item 9B.
Item 9B is to approve a request to adopt Resolution 2023-03, Number 1, and Resolution 2023-04, Number 2, and set the date for a public hearing for February 28, 2023, at 7 p.m. for the purpose of hearing any objections to the petition, the installation of said proposed improvements, and the creation of a special assessment district. Therefore, for the proposed establishment of a special assessment district for the Hickok Road Maintenance Agreement.
Do we have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Motion by Clerk Barry, supported by Trustee Anderson. Mr. O'Connor, you have the floor again. Carrie, you also have the floor.
This is another property owner-initiated district. It's a private road, it's gravel. Under this agreement, the township would grade the road 4 times during the calendar year and also apply stone, gravel on 2 of those applications.
Thank you. And this is an historical one. We're simply, this
Yeah.
has been in place for several years, that we're just renewing it.
Correct.
Did I miss anything, Carrie?
No.
Any further comments or questions from the board? Clerk Barry, question? Any questions? Comments from the public? Any comments from the public? I have a motion by Clerk Barry, supported by Trustee Anderson, to approve item 9B. Clerk Barry.
Clerk Barry, aye. Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph. Aye. Trustee Demink.
Aye.
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Treasurer Elliott.
Aye.
Supervisor Kersten.
Aye. Item 9C.
Item 9C is a recommendation to approve the modifications to APO 06-2018 Special Assessment District Policy and adopt Resolution 2023-07 Administrative Procedure Order 06-2018 Special Assessment District Policy.
Do I have a motion to approve? Supervisor Kersten will make a motion to approve,
Second?
supported by Clerk Barry. Do you want to address this, or you want,
Yeah, we're here to answer questions. I think the biggest change from the original APO from 2018, on this APO, we do have an informational meeting with the residents and the district before it comes to the board. And the purpose of that meeting is to discuss the cost, the schedule, and see if there's an interest to proceed. If the project dies at that meeting, the informational meeting, which has happened before, then it's never brought to the board for action. And that informational meeting with the district is now included in this APO.
thank you. Just some fill-in, administratively, we have several SADs out there. They come in various forms through the township, and what we did was update this SAD administrative procedure, make sure that it's legal, proper, and it functions within the executive level of the township moving forward. Again, there are several of these in place, and our attempt to just modernize it is really where this is placed. So, that being said, any questions from the board? Comments from the public? Comments from the public? I have a motion by Supervisor Kersten, supported by Clerk Barry, to approve item 9C as read. Clerk Barry.
Supervisor Kersten.
Aye.
Clerk Barry, aye. Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph.
Aye.
Trustee Demink.
Aye.
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Treasurer Elliott.
Aye.
Item 9D.
Item 9D is a recommendation to approve the modifications to APO 13-2019 Education, Training, and Travel Policy and adopt Resolution Number 2023-06 Administrative Procedure Order 13-2019 Education, Training, and Travel Policy.
Do I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Supported by Supervisor Kersten. Deputy Duchesne, do you want to address this? Some background here, again, just to modernize and update some of the APOs that we have in place to more current language. Director Duchesne.
Thank you, Supervisor Kersten. When we set in motion the administrative procedures orders, there are some that are required to be reviewed every 3 years, and this certainly is one of them. What you'll find for the most part is no material change in your prior order. There is a specificity for having the proper approval forms in advance to be approved and filed. And the what's been incorporated is a reference to the township purchasing cards, which are now addressed in the travel expenses while on township business section 2. We do require also report or outline, and that we just improved a little bit about where that's filed. Upon completion of the travel and training, that it be filed with the Human Resources, so we have that on file for examination. Specificity on the receipt, what the receipts must state, and a class of lodging for those that do have overnight travel, how to use the P card, the accommodation and terms there. The following guidelines about making reservations and using the Treasury tax exemption form. And then the maximum meal reimbursement rate per day is set at $60. That's about a $15 change over the 3 years. I know that many people feel that's, still not completely satisfactory, but we believe it's a reasonable adjustment for the time. Single day trips, we specify what we would reimburse, and I say that this is not a mandate to spend that. It may be also in meals, may be incorporated in the travel reservation or in the registration for the actual activity. That means you don't double down. That's covered by the registration. That is covered for that way. So pretty much the non-allowable expenses are further stated in the APO, but that hasn't been amended. And that really summarizes the majority of our changes. Those are, as we say, highlighted in red, or the old language is struck out in the order and what replaced it.
Thank you, sir. Trustee Vosper.
Thank you. I support this. We need to update our policies over the years. I'm wondering if we should consider changing from a dollar amount for the meals per day to reference something like the IRS guidelines. That way we don't have to change that number amount each year if it's attached to an index. And another thing would, if people do travel, have a conference in a high cost area, that would include, they would be getting reimbursed at a little higher rate. I know if you go to Boston, go to Traverse City, for example.
True.
It costs
Yeah.
much more for food there than it would here.
Many municipal or public agencies do that, tie that to the maximum IRS allowables in certain destination points, and they adjust for on the coast travel and other places. We can certainly do that. If people have a specificity as to the number preference, that's obviously what we stayed with here, but we could certainly amend or add language to that effect into the order.
I believe it's $60 in
Yes.
here, right?
Yes.
And the actual standard rate currently, the standard rate is $59. That would be for an area that's considered average. And then the highest, I believe, 74 is Mackinac Island, and 69 for Ann Arbor, which we're not going to have a whole lot of people spending the night there. Anyway, there's some other areas, but for the most part, I think $60 would about do it, but by using the per diem rate from the IRS, it saves us from having to change. If after reviewing, we see everything's good, we don't have to change it.
If anybody would like to amend it, we can certainly do so at this time.
I will make an amendment that we use the per diem rates for, as administered by the General Services Administration and cited in IRS publications. What's the number?
I'll support that.
I have a motion by trustee Vosberg, supported by Treasurer Elliott, to approve with the amendment as stated. You want to rephrase that for the record?
I just had a quick question before you took a vote.
Trustee Joseph.
The executive summary, under the, does this require expenditure of funds? No, but it changes the landscape in terms of what we spend on training and travel somewhat. Is there any review of, what we anticipate? Because Trustee Vosberg pointed out the meal reimbursement in the current, you have, $10 breakfast and such for lunch and dinner. And then the approved rate, I think, is a few dollars higher, but I'm curious, on a side note, Trustee Vosberg, who was then Commissioner Vosberg, wasn't quite as generous with the county employees, because my travel rate is $36 right now. So when I saw 60, I thought, wow, that, but I guess she's becoming more gracious and charitable now.
I'll chime in a little bit.
Yeah.
So we kicked this around, and we did look at that amount. And it's based on where we travel to here is the township. We were more comfortable administratively or executively sitting down and just say, listen, this is similar to what other communities around us are paying. Understanding that, as what Trustee Vosberg has brought out, that there is a regional reimbursement plan that's through the federal government, and we just chose not to adopt that. Not that it was wrong. I just wanted you to understand that mindset.
No, I understood that. I was just looking at what we anticipated cost of. I don't have the line item in front of me in terms of training and travel. I don't know how much we're getting, and then this isn't the time for it. But I'd like to see when the rule when I go out to training or any of my staff goes out to training, you got to bring something back to the group, and what are the responsibilities with the training, because you run the risk of having people just they go to a conference in Traverse City in the fall, and you wonder what's the value to the taxpayer. Does that person come back and energize the staff with new information about whatever it is that they learned at the conference, or do they submit the reimbursement and then head over for a color tour, and we don't see any ROI there. So looking at how we spend training and then what we anticipate this maybe being an additional expenditure is, I think, a pretty good look if you're going to change the APO.
A couple of comments. I think you'd now be much more comfortable with our procedure, similar to what you have, a request for travel and training. There's a budget estimate put on that form. It goes to a particular line item. Each department's responsible for that. In HR, I carry a general line item for something that the board or the supervisor may want to send somebody to that we sometimes can use. And as the APO states, you're responsible to return a report indicating an outline, at least form, and I have those on file where somebody produces an essay and says, here's what we did. And those are available for sharing on that. So spot on. That's exactly the practice standard of care that should be in a municipality and county too.
Any further questions? Clerk Barry?
I just want to state my support for the amendment. When we evaluated this policy, when we had a similar policy in the past, it was always my suggestion that since we follow the federal reimbursement guidelines for fuel and mileage and so on, that it would make sense, why don't we apply that as well to meal reimbursement? It just seemed like it was a very good idea, and I'm very grateful to Trustee Vosberg for making the suggestion. It was a suggestion that I had, again, years ago, but then it kind of fell by the wayside, so thank you for bringing that back up. I think it's a very good amendment.
Trustee Vosberg, do you have the specific federal,
I have the specific language.
just something we can reference to, and we'll include it in the APO
Yes.
before publication?
It'd be meals and incidental total. I'll just pass it down.
So again, I have a motion by Trustee Vosberg, supported by Treasurer Elliott, to make an amendment to the original motion. I don't know what the exact language you want to use. The government GSA, the General Services Administration per diem rates for Michigan. and we will make that change in the APO. It is for Michigan, yes.
Well, that's a Michigan page, you may want to just say the GSA amounts that are published in IRS publication.
Good,
That way, if you travel out of the state, it would include that.
okay. Any further comments from the board? None?
Do you have the language, Madam
Yeah.
Clerk?
The GSA, General Service Administration, FY 2023 per diem rates for Michigan, meals and incidental breakdown.
Right, but don't include the year because it changes each year. In
Correct.
fact, sometimes it changes mid-year.
So we'll exclude the year, the motion will be without the year.
Right.
So then with the amendment being offered and supported, I would amend my motion to approve the adoption of APO Administrative Procedure Order 13-2019, Resolution Number 2023-06, with the added language to adopt the rate, the per diem rates as published by the General Services Administration, issued in IRS publications.
Better move, because I think the rates are going to change. You may want to get this one on the books.
So I have a motion by Clerk Berry, supported, the original motion was supported by Clerk Berry, or made by Clerk Berry, supported by Supervisor Kersten. I will also continue that support if you're comfortable with that and make the appropriate changes.
That's fine.
Clerk Berry, would you call the roll?
Clerk Bear?
Yeah.
Comments from the public?
John Speaka, 53978 Connor Drive. Since we're making an amendment, I'd like to make a recommendation that we add another amendment. Under the tuition reimbursement, it's 3 years. I'd like to see that change to 5. So if any employee leaves prior to the township paying for their tuition within that 5-year period, they have to pay it back. I'd like to see that change to 5 years. Thank you.
Do we have any further comments from the public? Seeing no further comments from the public, I have a motion again by Clerk Berry, supported by Supervisor Kersten, to approve item 9D with the amended requested changes. Clerk Berry.
Clerk Berry, aye. Supervisor Kersten?
Aye.
Trustee Anderson?
Aye.
Trustee Joseph? Trustee Demink?
Aye.
Trustee Vosberg?
Aye.
Treasurer Elliott?
Aye.
Item 9E.
Item 9E is to approve a recommendation by the Department of Public Safety to purchase a new dispatch radio system from Motorola Solutions for $1,200,000.
Do I have a motion to approve? Trustee
Support.
Demink, supported by Trustee Anderson. Director Bassett.
Thank you. I'm here this evening requesting approval for the dispatch center and radio upgrade. The current system was installed in 2004, so I want you each to think about your cell phone in 2004 and how much technology has changed during that same period. We'll be installing 4 dispatch consoles, replacing police and fire radios to include portable and in-car radios. This contract also includes all necessary installation, training, and a standard 1-year warranty. Some items to note with this project: will be connecting to the state via the county with a fiber connection. This increased reliability and connection to the state. We will also convert our dispatch center to a true PSAP, or a public safety answering point. All radios will now have the ability to have an emergency call button activation that dispatch and all users will be notified in case of an emergency. This upgrade also allows us additional capacity to train dispatchers with the 4th dispatch console. This system will also allow us the capacity to encrypt our communications. We will be paying for this project with a 0% interest lease. The first of 2 payments will be at the beginning or commencement of the project, and the second payment will be in January of 2024 after the completion of the project. At that time, we will own all equipment. I also want to note that this that we now anticipate an additional $260,000 as a result of the 911 phone surcharge that was passed last June by the county. We have worked since the beginning of this project with Porter & Black, our IT group, and will continue to work with them throughout the project. And finally, I want to thank City Attorney Siebert for working with me to ensure the contract and the lease address any concerns of the township. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, sir. Comments or questions from the board? Trustee Vosberg.
Thank you. I support this. I think 2004 is a long time ago. We need to upgrade as needed. I did have a couple questions. In the document itself, it said that we're going to use existing antenna in line. That's still good? Is that a 2004 line in wire too?
So the antenna, but the big change that we're making is we're now connecting with fiber. So we were actually connecting only with, but now we're going to have a hard connection with fiber to the county, which is a significant change in the way that we're operating.
Okay, so only fiber or also the antenna? Or
We do
how
have
does
that as a
work?
backup.
As a backup only, okay. And then, do we have the same number of units of mobiles and portables?
We're replacing the numbers that we currently have, yes.
So same,
Yep, same numbers.
all right. You don't anticipate need for additional ones at this time?
At this point, we're replacing what we need, and obviously we'll always have the capacity to increase. Where we are expanding is our current dispatch center is a 3-station setup. We're expanding to a 4-station.
All right. And how long do you think these will last?
If we get the same run, I'll be pleased, but with something that I think is going to change the way that we fund and how we keep up with technology is that 911 surcharge will allow us to now better anticipate these costs, plan for them, and I anticipate keeping much more current with technology moving forward.
Sure. All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Supervisor.
Trustee Demink.
Director Bassett, is it procedure at RPD, does every officer have his own prep assigned to him, or is it just like so many preps, like afternoons got some and mids has got some other? How do you guys do it if you don't?
Every police officer, every firefighter is assigned a individual radio.
So they got their own radios, each one's assigned to them? Okay,
Yes, sir.
thank you.
Any further comments from the board? Comments from the public?
John Speaka, 53978 Connor Drive. I want to thank Director Bassett for bringing this to the board. I fully support this expenditure. It's very important to have the latest technology for our men and women in blue out there every day protecting this whole community. So I take that very seriously. So I support this 110%. And encryption technology is the wave of the future. We need to keep up with that technology, and we need to keep our men and women safe. Thank you.
Any further comments from the public? This is how antiquated our system is. Encryption technology and public safety has been here for over 15 years, and we are that far behind. So it's nothing new. We're just behind the curve. Thank you, Director Bassett. Any further comments from the board? I have a motion by Trustee Demink, supported by Trustee Anderson, to approve item 9E. Clerk Berry.
Trustee Demink.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph. Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Treasurer Elliott.
Aye.
Supervisor Kersten.
Aye.
Clerk Berry, aye.
Item 10, addendums, there are none necessary. Move to item 11, public comments. This is a public comment section. You have a 5-minute time limit. Please, the clock will begin when you announce your name. If you would, provide your name for the record.
John Speaka, 53978 Connor Drive. Under letter to the editor on last week's Voice, it was written by former treasurer, Mr. Paul LaFata. Macomb County Drain Commissioner Candace Miller was in Chesterfield Township to bestow sole ownership of the Gratiot Sewer Interceptor originally needed to construct the Macomb County Correctional Facility. Chesterfield, Lenox, and New Haven were invited to defray costs. From commission in 1986 until 2017, no records for inspections, repairs, estimated repair bill, over $10 million to be paid by the Chesterfield residents. Little history, Kwame Kilpatrick was convicted in federal court, sentenced to serve 28 years, and is today a free man. As mayor of Detroit, solicited, accepted payments equating to millions from persons seeking businesses with the city, most relevant, Detroit Water and Sewer Department that service Macomb municipalities. The issue hits home with an agreement with the Macomb Drainage District, selling bonds to acquire several interceptors and pump stations from the DWSD, including the 15-mile road interceptor, nearly $54.5 million in debt from a 2005 repair project. Anthony Morocco, Macomb County Drainage Commissioner District, tried to recover $25.5 million from Kilpatrick and Ferguson for allegedly overbuilt Sterling Heights sinkhole repair. The suit filed alleges a widespread scheme to overcharge the Detroit Water and Sewer Department for time, labor, and materials to stabilize and repair collapsed 15-mile sewer in 2004 and 5. Then owned by DWSD, since acquired by the Macomb and Oakland counties, Chesterfield charged $410,000 for their share of the legal fees, $4.9 million for 2016. A 15-mile sinkhole substantially increased sewer rates for Chesterfield residents. Detroit Free Press published December 27, 2016, Keith Madley, $170 million in repairs to the Macomb County sewer pipe. Why another sinkhole? National sewer infrastructure experts told the Free Press that line failures involving relatively new pipes usually means one or more of three things: poor construction, poor engineering and design, or a lack of maintenance. We talked about lack of maintenance tonight. The contract for the North Gratiot Interceptor under Public Improvement Act 1939 assigns the County Drainage Commission, Chesterfield, Lenox, New Haven, and Macomb Correctional Facility. Macomb County Drain Commission sold bonds, solicited bids, selected engineering and design sources, and construction contractors made final inspection, paid the invoice. Ms. Miller assumes no responsibility for the past actions or expenditures made by the Office of the Macomb County Drain Commission, has no intention of holding Lenox, New Haven, and the Macomb Correctional Facility responsible for their share of the $10 million repair. This cannot continue. The $10 million plus the 26-mile sewer bond that this board passed, $13.75 million, we gave a free handout to the wealthy and well-connected. So at $13.75 million equates to a large hole in the pockets of the Chesterfield residents. Compliments of this board. My question is, to the current supervisor, you passed this bond, 13.75. I've yet to see the voice report on this bond that was passed. Now that that 13.7 bond, we, at the last township meeting, we got $4 million from Lisa McLean. That included in that bond, it was the Demink pump station. So had you not given the wealthy and well-connected this free sewer line, we could have, once we take possession of the sewer line, did a bond and did the repairs for the current residents, that this would have benefited today. Again, I don't think you understand that builders and developers pay for their own sewer lines. There's no freebies here on the backs of the residents, but you haven't gotten that point yet. And the thing that I think you should focus on is your budget. You're $3.3 million in the red, operating on a daily budget deficit. So I've yet to see any focus. I've yet to see a plan from you on how you expect to turn this around. You didn't do it in the police department, and you're not doing it here. So you get a complete F, failure. Thank you.
Any further comments from the public? Any further comments from the public?
Good evening. Mike Rayner, 26175 Jack Grove Lane. Should have asked this question earlier, but you can answer it later. Wondering if we have blood drives. I've been a blood donor since I was 16 years old. It's pathetic how few people donate blood, and I think it would be great if the township took a role in that. Otherwise, I need to talk about my bus stops, and ironically, about the time of this meeting last month, the end of December, it was just in time to see the red tags on there that said, "Get rid of these shelters." And as it turns out, if there is a complaint, as opposed to up to like 2,000 compliments of what we're doing, then they need to be taken down. So sure enough, we're going to have a Valentine gift of removing these very well accepted shelters the week of Valentine's Day. It disturbs me because I've had bus drivers as well as many, many bus riders be very, very complimentary of the additional shelter. Even today, as I was working out there, I announced to this gentleman who was saying how great they were that they were going away. And the reason they've been so grateful, obviously, is because they're needed. I mean, there's no other explanation for why they appreciate what we're doing. It's because they're needed. It's because they shouldn't have to stand out there tomorrow in the snow that we're going to have, you know, just holding on to a pole. In some cases, there's even a place to stand. So I think it's ridiculous that that's the state. Also, I'm wondering if there's any possibility that the township may buy one. I happen to, on my phone, have one that looks very much like the one that's at 23 in Gratiot for $500. And the place I would like it to be, south of 22 Mile Road, it even has a concrete slab available for it to be attached to. So I do wonder if that's something that the township could do. Otherwise, Thursday, I'm going to be at the board meeting for SMART, and we're going to chat with them about their lack of response to anything that we're talking about that we think that is needed badly here. And one of the major things is a bus line on 23 Mile Road. I think I mentioned before that many, many people, especially a group of, job group said, you know, they could hire many, many people if we had bus lines on 23 Mile Road. So I hope that Chesterfield has a voice in supporting that, and I know you've had a very meaningful meeting with SMART, so I'm hopeful that the outcome will be to the benefit not only of the people looking for work, but primarily to the businesses that can't fill their open positions. So again, the response, we've had well over 2,000, 3,000 people saying how great it is that we're just trying to acknowledge, you know, providing additional bus lines, and primarily just to protect our citizens from the elements. And not at every stop, just where the data shows most passengers are coming and going from. So we're hoping that something happens there, and I'm going to continue pushing it until something does. It is a little disturbing, wrapping up real quickly. Obviously, when you read the comments on the various Facebook sources, there are only a couple of individuals who really are very outgoing about their criticism, and if you read them closely, their reasons are not really ones that I think we would ever feel justified eliminating that. So anyway, the fight goes on, and whatever the township can do to help make that happen for our bus riders, I appreciate it. Even bus drivers stop and chat with me. It's very rewarding to know that the effort is well received. Let's hope that the outcome is satisfactory as well. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any further comments from the public? No further comments from the public? Bring it back up to the board. Trustee Demink, you want to start tonight?
No, I don't have anything. I'm just wait till we go to closed session.
Thank you. Trustee Anderson?
Yeah, just, next board meeting is February 14th, which ironically is also Valentine's Day. Watch the roads out there. Looks like winter's coming back to visit us. Take care.
Trustee Vossward? Yes. Trustee Joseph?
Just a couple of quick comments. Just wanted to let the board know the Friends of Chesterfield Police annual bowling fundraiser was held last Friday. And for those of you that attend the meetings, you know that there's been a changing of the guard and the executive board, and it created some potential challenges for the bowling fundraiser, just to say the least. But the new members of the board, one of which is our old friend Linda Hartman, who has stepped up to take on some responsibilities in that group, was a nice addition. And the bowling fundraiser was a huge success. It really was quite a great turnout, and just a lot of interaction with the public and a lot of positive feedback from members of our community who got a chance to, see some of the members of our department and guard and K-9 and, all of the Friends groups, members kind of rallying new members, and it was just really a great event. The other comment that I wanted to kind of expound on that I didn't really want to talk too much in my board reports having to do with the library, I like to try to bring just fact and data back to the board and to the community during the board reports, but I wanted to share with you just a quick observation as your liaison that is more my personal opinion. When I got on the library board, the liaison, there was a lot of debate about whether or not to go back out for another millage. There had been, the first millage had failed, and then there was talk about, where to go. And at the same time, our board was acquiring a community center, and we were looking at options for overlap, for partnerships, whether that be within our own community or neighboring communities, but we always look to try to partner. And I appreciated, Supervisor Kersten, the outreach that we've done over the last year as it relates to our friends at the library. And at our last library meeting, Josh and your administrative assistant, Karen Garby, just came to the meeting so that during public comments they could say to the board, we speak for the supervisor's office along with the board liaison. We are supportive of anything that we can do to support the library's expansion in the community center, or to look at even drastic things like the acquisition of Township property to potentially lower costs. And there's a number of ongoing efforts that our board has put forward. And I'm a little disappointed that the only option that seemed to have been available to perhaps the library director and her influence on the board is this idea of a millage. And I would, if at the end of the day, and you look at all the options that we have, including an earnest partnership with the board, would you need a millage? And I don't know that we can do anything more as a board, or just in terms of your executive sort of responsibilities with the board, to extend that courtesy to the library. And I hope that the new leadership there perhaps takes better advantage of that, and we can really problem solve, because I think a perpetual millage is just a horrible idea, and I hate to see it. And I know we all get comments like, why are you approving this going out? And we're not, we're absolutely not. But it would be good to see an enhanced relationship, and I'm hoping that the new library director and the board maybe engages us a little bit more on options moving forward other than a millage. But, and also lastly, thank you to Director Bassett. The Motorola contract is huge, and it's taken a lot of energy and a lot of work with Attorney Siebert, and I appreciate you acknowledging, because when we met, it was pretty clear that this is a tricky contract, and how to execute it the way that you did was really masterful. So thank you for that.
Treasurer Elliott?
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. Just want to thank everybody for their work on the Friends of Chesterfield Police fundraiser. That's a great opportunity to get your hats and your shirts and all. It says Friends of Chesterfield Police. And they need to order more large sweatshirts, I heard, David. So if you could pass that on, it'd be appreciated.
I took up the last few.
All right, and thank you. Have a good night, everybody.
Clerk Berry.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. Just very briefly, over the next couple of weeks, the Clerk's Department, in concert with the Human Resources Department, will be issuing some job postings for positions available in the clerk's office. I know there are also positions available township-wide or that will be coming up here very shortly. If you know anyone who is interested in an exciting career in municipal government, we would invite them to please apply. It's actually a tremendously wonderful place to work. There's so many benefits. I'm sure our HR director would be able to expound on all the wonderful benefits of working here in Chesterfield. So we'd like you to please encourage anyone who is a job seeker or someone who's just looking to make a change in their career to look into our website and check into the job opportunities in Chesterfield. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to thank HRC and Jamie and Brent that came here, gave the presentation tonight. I think that is what they have provided us is a great foundation to move forward, and in the future, I probably, in the coming future, I will have another action item with them that addresses water and sewer fees and how we approach that, keeping in mind that there is a rate increase that's being proposed by Great Lake and for both water and sewer. The library. Trustee Joseph, I agree with you, can't agree with you more. I will continue to press, and we will continue to press as a leadership team here in Township to partner with them at any level, particularly with that community center. We walked into that building and into that lease with an understanding that they were at least going to partner with us. I don't know what direction they plan on going. I, like you, was disappointed because I thought we were making headway, and the opportunity that we have at that community center with partners, not only with Chesterfield Library, but with Chesterfield Township, but continues with the anchor-based schools. That partnership that we can form there, and moving into the future, I think that is the only course and direction that serves our township in the best possible manner. So we will continue to reach out to the new director, and we will offer our opinions to him, and conversations with him will be ongoing and continuing, whoever he may be. Public safety radio system, as you know, this was on our capital plan going back 2 years. We started looking at this, longer than 2 years. I can't stress enough to you as the ex-public safety director, and then having intimate knowledge of how these radio systems work, much like Mr. Vosberg has, and ex-chairman Vosberg at the county, when the county went to a complete 800 system with the state and partnered. We were the second police department and fire department in the county that went to this 800 radio system. And it removed anybody that carried around old bricks for radios in the 80s. These radios offer technology, security, and safety, not only to the policemen, but to the firemen across the board. So I want to thank the board members for approving that. And again, it keeps us ahead of the curve and with the technology in public safety. So Director Bassett and the team at the police department, excellent job, and looking forward to getting those radios installed and implemented and up and running. Mr. Speaker, your comments at the board, I'll address them individually. Patently false. No bond has been sold. The board has not approved any action. Your disinformation campaign that continues at every board meeting doesn't hurt anybody but yourself. Mr. Rayner, the fire department does blood drives annually. I think they're on a quarterly basis, and again, it's unfortunately they're full because they're scheduled appointments. But I'll reach out to the public safety director, and we have the community center. There's another alternative site. We used to host them in here. The seniors did it. We used to host them in here, but it became problematic because they only run from daylight hours, 8 in the morning till 2 in the afternoon, then they pack up and bring in. And as you know, they bring in quite a team with them, so. But we'll work on that. The SMART conversation is ongoing, I promise you. Like anything else, you know, you bump your head with them, and then it's not like you have a go-to person that you can say, hey, this is Chesterfield, we want a response. Well, that person is Southeast Michigan. And when you have that conversation with it, so we'll get back with you. We'll try and, so I appreciate what you're doing with SMART. Keep on their tails as we are here. We are scheduling meetings with them. We're gonna move this forward, and it's gonna take us some time, though. I just tell from the time we engaged. And unfortunately, you said, can we buy as a municipality? The first thing our attorney's sitting here, once a municipality gets involved, permitting, right-of-ways, liabilities, all of those things become concerns. So unfortunately, I don't think we'd be able to participate, other than we will continue our conversation with SMART and try and achieve what your goals are. With that being said, I have no further comments. Do I have a motion? I'll entertain a motion to enter into closed session. Clerk Berry? No, Clerk Berry, you want to?
Motion to enter closed session for strategy and negotiation in connection with the negotiation of a collective bargaining agreement pursuant to Section 8(1)(c) of the Michigan Open Meetings Act, and to consider the purchase of real property pursuant to Section 8(1)(d) of the Michigan Open Meetings Act.
Do I have a motion to approve?
Motion to enter open session, or excuse me, enter closed session.
Motion by Clerk Berry, supported by Elliott. All those in favor? Oh, I'm sorry, roll call. Sorry.
Clerk Berry, aye. Treasurer Elliott.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph. Aye. Trustee Demink.
Aye.
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Supervisor Kersten.
Aye. Thank you. We clear the room?
Motion to go back into open session?
Support. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Open session. Item 9F. Clerk Berry.
Item 9F is ratification of the 2023 through 2025 labor agreement with the Police Officers Labor Council, POLC Clerical Unit, representing Public Safety Department clerical staff, tentatively ratified by the union on December 12th, 2022.
Do I have a motion to approve? Trustee Vosberg, supported by Elliott. Any comments from the public? No comments from the public? Comments from the board? Comments from the board? Clerk Berry?
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Treasurer Elliott.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph. Trustee Domingue.
Aye.
Supervisor Kersten.
Aye.
Clerk Berry, aye.
Item 9G.
Item 9G is ratification of a 2023 through 2025 labor agreement with the Michigan Association of Public Employees, DPW unit, tentatively ratified by the union on December 20th, 2022.
Do I have a
So
motion?
moved.
Domingue?
Support.
By Trustee Elliott, or Treasurer Elliott. Comments from the public? Comments from the board? Clerk Berry?
Trustee Domingue.
Aye.
Treasurer Elliott.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph. Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Supervisor Kersten.
Aye.
Clerk Berry, aye.
Item 9H.
Item 9H is ratification of a 2023 through 2025 labor agreement with the Michigan Association of Public Employees, MAPE Technical Unit, representing the classifications of assessor, building inspector, code enforcement officer, and fleet technician, with the tentative agreement ratified by the union on December 12th, 2022.
So moved.
Support.
Trustee Vosberg, supported by Clerk Berry. Comments from the public? Comments from the board? Clerk Berry?
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Clerk Berry, aye. Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph. Trustee
Aye.
Domingue. Treasurer Elliott.
Aye.
Supervisor Kersten.
Aye. Motion to
Mr. Supervisor,
I'm sorry.
I'd like to make a motion to authorize the Township Supervisor to proceed with the purchase of real property as discussed in closed session.
Second.
Motion by Clerk Berry, supported by Trustee Domingue. Comments from the public? Comments from the board? Clerk Berry?
Clerk Berry, aye. Trustee
Aye.
Domingue. Trustee Anderson. Trustee Joseph. Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Treasurer Elliott.
Aye.
Supervisor Kersten.
Aye. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Meeting's adjourned, 9:14.
Good meeting, Brad.